Omar al-Bashir, he orchestrated the Darfur genocide that killed about 300,000 people directly. And he ruled Sudan for 30 years. He became the first sitting president indicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes, crimes against humanity too. Sudan is Africa's third largest country, but before he knew it, all of his Sudan, a part of his country, went south. Bin Laden was a close friend of his, and following the 9/11 attacks, al-Bashir actually took him in for a while. The brute scale and duration of this brutal dictatorship is classic S-tier stuff. But currently being in jail does not meet the bar of top-tier dictatoring, A-tier.
And Nelson Mandela! Nelson! Hey, I was in jail too, man!
Gnassingbé, Eyadéma sounds like what you might come up with when you try to confuse your boss at work. I'm sorry, I can't leave the house. It's Gnassingbé, Eyadéma. Now, if I asked you if you knew what Togo was, you'd say, sure, it's that country over there close to Samoa and Fiji. But I assure you, that is Tonga. This is a toga. Eyadéma ruled tiny Togo for 38 years, making him one of Africa's longest serving dictators. Despite Togo's small size, he did manage to kill thousands and terrorize millions more. He survived multiple assassination attempts and claimed to have magical powers. And now Singamadiman. That one was very bad, I'm sorry. Punching above your weight, I'll give him a solid beat here. Yahya Jammeh. This man claimed he could cure AIDS with herbs and bananas.
Yahya Jammeh has, he says, received a mandate to cure AIDS as long as it's on a Thursday, and he says he can cure asthma as long as it's on a Saturday.
Small nation, massive delusions of grandeur. F-tier for literally propagating the worst possible African stereotypes you could propagate. Mr. Macías Afwerki of Eritrea. Afwerki rose through the ranks and has come to rule Eritrea since their war of independence almost 30 years ago. Despite this country often being known as the North Korea of Africa, it is actually quite ironic because people are seldom able to leave North Korea, while in Eritrea, people leave quicker than my dad did, and it could perhaps more accurately be thought of as Syria and North Korea's love child. And he's created such a repressive state of control, over 500,000 of his citizens have fled the country. That's roughly 10% of the entire population. Now, when your main export is your citizens, your governance strategy does need some work. Credit to him though for being completely independent and anti-Western and outside aid. An X-factor of a mandatory military service that can last,
how do you say, indefinitely.
Some people have served for over 20 years in this national service, but he's more like your regular hardworking kid that makes sure he dictates the basics well. Solid C tier.
In the annals of Nigerian history, one name evokes both fear and fascination. General Sani Abacha, a soldier, a ruler, a man who rose through the ranks to become Nigeria's most powerful leader, leaving behind a legacy shrouded in controversy.
Sani Abacha looted $5 billion from Africa's most populous nation in just 5 years. That's $1 billion a year. F tier, because you could achieve all that with capitalism and democracy. Abdelaziz Bouteflika ruled Algeria for 14 years, from 1999 to 2013. But then, unfortunately, he had a stroke. This didn't stop him though, and he ruled for another 6 years thereafter, becoming the first phantom president and clinging to power even after he was barely able to speak. He was still literally wheeled out for public events, similar to a Weekend at Bernie's style of politics. While not as violent as some of the others on this list, I think it does take something to rule with just a stroke and no pen. C for spirit. Teodoro, Obiang, Nguema, Mbasogo. This is a man who claims to be in permanent contact with the Almighty and who can kill people by just naming them. Tiny Equatorial Guinea has been ruled by Mr. Obiang for over 40 years, after overthrowing and executing his own uncle. Coming soon. His son owns $100 million yachts and Michael Jackson's crystal glove. Amongst them, the biggest achievements of the country is nepotism and eBay. Now, you might think D tier, but this guy is the GOAT if we're talking years. I mean, this guy assumed power, well, he took power, I assumed, 10 years before I was even born. And I'm almost 30, bruh. C tier.
There's a constitutional referendum. 2 7-year terms. Will you step down in 2016?
That's why I say It depends on the people.
How can it depend on the people? It's a law.
Because it's not a personal problem of my will.
Blaise Compaoré of Burkina Faso ruled for a good 27 years by killing his best friend, Thomas Sankara, who is an actual hero and leader of this continent. F tier. Mobutu Sese Seko ruled Zaire, the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, for 32 years and stole an estimated $5 billion from his country while they collapsed around him. He renamed the nation Zaire and forced all citizens to adopt authentic African names. He ironically forced his nation's people to adopt a name that they did not want necessarily, because they were forced to adopt names that they did not want necessarily. Except somehow his Swiss bank accounts kept their European name. D tier. Denis Sassou Nguesso ruled the Republic of the Congo, not the DRC, for 35 years across 2 separate periods, treating the oil-rich Congo like his personal family business. Nothing says democracy like ruling for more than 3 decades, building a palace with more money than your education budget. F tier. Nguesso. Abiy Ahmed can perhaps not yet be considered a dictator, given that he was elected and is not yet pushed the boundaries of his term limits. However, I do give him a solid C tier ranking, because it does take something really special to win a Nobel Peace Prize just before being responsible for more than 500,000 deaths, and not having anyone in the world notice. Jean-Bédel Bokassa. While his people starved, he took the opportunity to spend 1/3 of his country's GDP on his coronation. Now that's fancy economist talk for saying that 1 in every 3 transactions, any sale, any exchange of money that year in that country was directly related to his crowning. Fun fact, he once beat school children to death with his walking stick during a custom disciplinary visit. Even by dictator standards, that is... Actually, that's not even it. Apparently, he was also a cannibal and allegedly even fed human flesh to visiting foreign diplomats. Man, now that's how to serve up some real local cuisine. And also, he allegedly fed others to crocodiles, which he kept as pets. The wide-ranging bizarrity made him the archetypal mad African dictator, and definitely somebody very uncomfortable to share the car with. A tier. José Eduardo dos Santos ruled Angola for a good 38 years, making him one of the longest-serving presidents in Africa's history. His family accumulated billions, while most Angolans remained in extreme poverty of about $2 a day. Nudge nudge, wink wink, his daughter became the richest woman in Africa. One could almost say that nepotism runs in the family. To be fair, his regime did coincide with a brutal 27-year civil war, so we can't blame him for all of the deaths, and we can place him in a solid D tier. Francisco Macías Nguema banned the word intellectual and literally destroyed all of the boats so that he could prevent any escape from Equatorial Guinea. He made it illegal to use the word work. The man was so paranoid he executed all of his relatives, most of his relatives. Except, of course, for the family member that killed him in a bloody coup. Don't worry, I'm sure he made Uncle proud, given that he's on this list too. Nguema killed 1/3 of Equatorial Guinea's population during his 11-year reign. That's a Holocaust-level percentage in a single African nation. And he did this in a very Holocausty kind of way. The systemic extermination of 1/3 of his country's population represents the highest per capita deaths of any modern dictator.
Macías would eventually replace the national motto with "There is no other God than Macías." Yes, that actually happened.
S-tier devastation right there. I'd like to interrupt this tier list to just briefly remind you with a disclaimer that we are making light of some of the most serious and gruesomely horrific incidents and past stories, people who have ever graced this continent and world. That is to say that we should not take it lightly. It is no joke. This is massive suffering caused by these people. Please do deep dive in the links below. I've put in references for each of these, and try and stay up to date with actual contemporary African geopolitics. You can do that right here. The self-proclaimed King of Kings of Africa ruled Libya for a good 42 years with a combination of oil money, bizarre ideology, Western aid, and international terrorism. He wrote the Green Book, which was mandatory reading for the entire country. Imagine being forced to read your dictator's blog. Now, Gaddafi sponsored terrorists worldwide, but he kept a personal bodyguard unit of virgin women, warriors, he'd say. Of course, his end came courtesy of disobeying America and the Arab Spring. When NATO intervened, it turns out that oil money couldn't buy you loyalty because the next guy can also sell your oil. He was responsible for thousands of deaths domestically, thousands more internationally, but at the end of the day, we'll give him a solid B tier just on sheer reputation and being the face of dictatorship for so long. Mengistu's Red Terror campaign killed an estimated 500,000 people in just 3 years. He personally executed officials during Politburo meetings and threw their bodies to actual wild dogs. This is a man who turned the political meetings into the set of potentially horror films and famines into actual weapons. This guy is like an exaggerated villain from a Bond movie, from the weird brutality fetishes to proving yet again that it's communism that can work if we just try one more time. Lansana Conte ruled Guinea for 24 years, not to be confused with the Equatorial Guinea. He seized power in a bloodless coup. His regime was marked by economic mismanagement and human rights abuses, aren't they all? Most preferentially neglect over outright brutality. Guinea has the world's largest bauxite reserves, yet under his rule, most citizens still live in poverty. Nothing says failed leadership and dictatorship like failing to properly exploit your country. D tier. Robert Mugabe, Zimbabwe. This man literally broke math with his economic policies. His wife Grace's shopping sprees earned her the nickname Gucci Grace. His evolution from liberation hero to economic destroyer became a cautionary tale about how revolutionary leaders do not necessarily understand economics. Robert Mugabe goes down in history as the man who somehow broke the record for fastest inflation rate.
That amount of money doesn't even exist! That's like saying, I want a bajillion dollars!
I'm not sure whether that's a real record, but try reaching inflation of 96 trillion%. That's a real number. It has 21 zeros on it. I could have had mercy for his freedom fighting, but given I'm a white Afrikaans farmer, F tier.
Idi Amin, most amazing man there's ever been. He the general, the president, the king on the scene. Idi Amin.
Uganda have to agree with me that this next one is perhaps the undisputed heavyweight champion and poster boy of African tyranny. Idi is something of a caricature of the African dictator. I mean, this guy killed an estimated 300,000 people in just 8 years. He expelled Uganda's entire Asian population. That's about 80,000 people in just 90 days. But apparently the unrecognized King of Scotland didn't just stop at eating haggis and doodle sacks. He allegedly practiced cannibalism too, which allowed him to always keep a cool head in the freezer. Uganda went from a promising East African nation to an international pariah. But push his boundaries and you might be challenged to actual fisticuffs. I mean this literally. He once challenged Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere to a man-to-man boxing match to settle their border disputes. And let me tell you, this guy was 195 centimeters. That's about like 6'4" and 120 kilograms. I don't know how many pounds, but like damn expensive. He was also a boxing champion in his youth. Peak dictator energy. That's S-tier devastation right there, because the country is still recovering today.